All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mickey. And then this is the last part of the How to Make and Present a Poster web series. So today we'll be talking about your presentation and your pitch, arguably the most important part of your poster, which isn't actually on your poster. So let's dive in. So we know this comic is silly for a lot of reasons, right? The text size, for one, is ridiculous, as we've previously discussed in other videos. And just copying from your paper to a poster does not work. They're not the same medium, and the content definitely needs to be altered before putting it on a poster. But also, I think that this cartoon kind of encapsulates some of the dual stress involved with the poster presentation. Partially, you feel like a poster is about selling yourself, right? When you don't get people coming up to your poster, you feel like you're losing somehow, even though it's probably just a matter of your research not being of interest to that highly specialized expert. But on the other hand, you feel pretty awkward and as though your research should probably explain itself. You know, when someone comes up to your poster, you just kind of want to gesture and say, well, there it is, right? The research is so evident to you, but you shouldn't become complacent in this understanding. For someone just entering your poster for the first time, it'll likely be unclear where to start, why you did what, and what it means in a context relevant to them. There's also a sense of uncertainty of their level of interest when they first approach, right? Are they just standing close to read the paper and see if they're interested? Do they want the whole story of your life? How do you remedy this? So the answer is basically have two different pitches prepared, an elevator pitch for those wandering and wondering, and a more in-depth, although not probably biographical level analysis, which is about your 10-minute walkthrough. Your elevator pitch is going to be what we're going to discuss today because it's probably the most important thing to craft really well. And your 10-minute walkthrough is something that's going to feel much more comfortable to you as you lead them through your poster, talk about what you did, more in like a lab presentation type of way, as opposed to a, hey, I'm going to gauge your interest on this really quick type of way. So the elevator pitch, right? Let's talk about it. So there's a couple of different lengths you can make your elevator pitch, right? 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on how long your elevator ride is, basically. Each allows you to get just a little bit more info in. But for today's purposes, we're going to go with the 60-second elevator pitch, which is probably the hardest to craft. Because it includes the least amount of information, right? For the 3 minute or the 5 minute or even the 10 minute, it's just essentially the structure of your elevator pitch plus some more information, right? So by starting with the elevator pitch, we're going to help craft your ability to, hone in and really gauge someone's interest. Because basically that's what an elevator pitch is, right? It's the chance to make a really good first impression and open the door to further discussion. No one's trying to, make deals on an elevator. No one's trying to, cure cancer on an elevator. But what they are trying to do is, make connections, see if the person on the elevator is also interested, if they have a different perspective, if you could collaborate in the future, things like that. All right, so how do you make your small research project fit into the big picture, right? How do you make all the work you did feel like it has the significance that it should have? These are two kind of opposing ideas, right? Well, the answer is an hourglass, right? You start big, you get small, and you finish big. So first up, you should probably start with the problem you're addressing, or in a lot of biology or medical research, this is the disease you're studying. It's basically your big why, right? Why should people care? You could maybe mention one or two like really relevant statistics if that's interested, like according to Pew, public speaking is the #1 fear among adults in the US, coming in even above death, right? See, with that quote, I've now established that public speaking is not only a big problem and needs to be addressed, but I've also hooked the audience. Maybe they're afraid of public speaking. Maybe, death, that seems like a pretty big fear. How could public speaking be bigger than that? I've gauged their intention and I've drawn them in with my very first sentence. Next, you want to provide an introduction to the field. This is the very bare bones introduction to the field. You have no way of getting into it in any significant matter. Try to remember, KISS, right? Keep it simple, silly, right? So if I were continuing with my example of public speaking, I could say, to address this widespread fear, many schools have instituted a mandatory speech class, and the prevalence of voluntary groups like Toastmakers has skyrocketed in the last 50 years, right? So that's kind of, giving a little bit of background. Now we kind of transition into next point, which is going to be your problem, right? So we're transitioning from background to your next point. Okay. So maybe I would say, however, one group is frequently overlooked: college students. As they enter a highly specified field, opportunities to learn to present are often high risk, and most career-related learning is learned on the job. But what if undergraduate students had more opportunities to practice communicating in their specialized field in college, right? See how I ended it? The natural flow showed what is known in the field, found a hole in the knowledge, and then presents a question that begs an answer, right? An answer that I can provide. So this comes to your project, right? Now we enter the most narrow part of the hourglass, but you'll also notice that it's such a small portion of the hourglass, the total height of the hourglass, only a small portion of it is actually this thinnest part, which might feel funny. Hey, that's months or years of your work, right? But remember, the goal of this pitch is to open doors and go deeper. This is a Costco sample, right? This is not a meal. So remember, we'll talk more about this section in a second, but it should be 1 or 2 sentences max. For example, to attempt to bridge this gap in resources, I compiled several resources and personal experiences into a 5-minute presentation I pre-recorded and released online for undergraduate student use. Right, so that's a pretty good 1 to 2 sentence explanation of my project, how it fits into this realm of public speaking, right? Next, you should discuss the direct implications and future directions, right? So beyond curing cancer, what does your project directly accomplish? How does it contribute to this question you just raised at the end of the intro? My public speaking project, this video, creates a resource for undergraduates to prepare a short pitch that can be used as a platform for building more concrete curriculum for teaching undergraduate research presentation skills. It provides opportunity to build the confidence of undergraduates and empower them to seek more presenting opportunities. Right? So I just put my project, which is this video, in the context of, well, maybe it could be an entire curriculum. Maybe this video will help people build their confidence in their ability to present. So I'm building it out again, right? We're building out from exactly what my video is to what are the implications of my video. And then finally, we bring it home with the problem and disease again in a short sentence, right? So it may feel a little corny, but remember, that's what they'll walk away in this elevator thinking about. So to finish out my example, I could say something like, as a first step towards increasing widespread comfort with public speaking, the video I created establishes a precedent and reference for larger presentation-based curriculum, providing college students the training that they will carry with them for life. So I just explained my whole sentence or my whole project in literally 10 sentences and about 60 seconds. And although you have a good idea of what my project was, you don't know what the content of my presentation was necessarily or how it was received, right? You don't know my plans for further videos, but these are all questions you could ask to continue this conversation. If you walk away and never see me again, however, I have sold my entire project to you in a neat little package. This is the goal of the elevator pitch. All right, so now we're going to go back to the discussion of your project, right? How do you get your whole project into 1 or 2 sentences? It might seem easy when I'm presenting it about this short video that I'm creating, but your research has been months, maybe years. So how do you get that down to 1 or 2 sentences at its core? So here's one strategy that I like to use. I like to start by writing out your project. Maybe it'll take a page, maybe a paragraph. Feel free to leave the number of resources or the measurements of each buffer that you used. Those types of details can be left out. If there's 1 or 2 key methods, maybe you could leave those in, but no more than that. Remember, you don't need to talk about the significance in this portion. You just need to talk about the next step, and you don't need to talk about the next steps. You just should write out what you did and what you found. It may be easier than you think. Keep it simple. Just write out exactly what you did, and maybe not some of the details, but what did you do and what does that accomplish, right? So once you have that, cut it in half, right? Cut the page to a half a page. Cut the paragraph to half a paragraph. Leave out your materials and methods. Leave out your numbers. Work on synthesizing, right? And once you do that, you'll probably be like, whew, I'm glad I'm done now, right? That was so hard. Well, do it again and again and again until you have it down to just 1 sentence, right? Don't pull this, Charles Dickens endless clauses trick. Get down to 1 solid, reliable sentence. Just keep cutting, seeing what's extraneous, what can you remove, right? Get it down to 1 sentence. Then finally, cut out all the articles and non-essential words. Talk like Kevin, right? Use this caveman talk. Go to a friend or a relative that will preferably not laugh at you probably, and see how with even a handful of words, you can communicate this idea, right? Explain using your handful of words. And if they understand the concept, great, you're in a great position. If not, go back to step one and try cutting down in a different way. Keep repeating until people are able to understand when you speak with, this, caveman talk, leaving out all the articles, right? Now, when you actually give your presentation, you obviously get all of your articles and your transition words. And in fact, I recommend them in most circumstances. But now you've seen how, even with just a handful of words, you can communicate your idea. Getting your months or years of works down to a sentence or two should seem easy now. You did it in 5 words, right? Use these key distilled words that you found as the base of your final sentence. All right, so that's how to summarize your project. Finally, let's talk about some final presentation tips, right? So my first presentation tip is to introduce yourself, right? A lot of times we get so nervous about presenting and talking about our research that we forget to talk about ourselves a little bit. And that's just as much a part of your research in the context of, an elevator pitch. You're trying to sell yourself as much as you're trying to sell your research, right? So shake hands if possible and if safe, right? Give your name and your major, maybe what lab or school you're in, and then ask them how their day is going. Remember, we're doing this because we want to present our research and show off a little bit, yes, but mostly to make connections to other really smart people, right? To get their feedback and to maybe get a job or some funding or something like that in the future. This is as much about you as it is about the research. Next is eye contact, right? It seems pretty self-explanatory, but I know a lot of people, including myself, go into some other realm when you're talking about your research. You look off to the side. It's easier to look anywhere but at someone else when you're bearing your months and months of research out for judgment and digging in dark recesses of your brain to remember facts and stats. But eye contact is really, really important. So try to do it as much as possible. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this presentation, it is please do not memorize a script. Memorize bullet points, or like I like to think of it as anchors, right? Scripts allow you few opportunities to have true back and forths with those you're presenting to. And if you lose your place, you're basically screwed. But with enough rehearsal, you'll develop a script and phrases you like naturally from your bullet points, which is infinitely better, right? And this brings me to the final point. Rehearsal is your best friend. If you have roommates, they should be ready to explain your research as well as you by the end of it, right? But in all seriousness, please practice in front of people. Practice in different settings, try out different things. I recommend not necessarily practicing in a mirror because you can freak yourself out, but maybe try a sentence or two. Try some expressions and gestures, just so you know what others are seeing when you're presenting. Just use gestures purposefully, especially over Zoom, right? Hands are very distracting. Laser pointers can be distracting. But if you refer to anything on your poster, please point to it. Make an expression to let them know, hey, I'm pointing at something, right? Otherwise, people will spend the next 5 minutes trying to figure out where you were talking about. So this concludes our elevator pitch advice. After offering this up, allow the viewer to ask questions or maybe walk away. If they seem to be interested, you can continue and move on to your 10 or 20 or 30 or hour-long talk, right? That goes through more of the details. A well-crafted poster will be your best guide, so just make sure to check out other presentations for more info on that. In the meantime, be confident, trust yourself, trust your research, and you'll do great. Best of luck.